Chapter 19. Just like that, I was on my way to prison. I guess I should have been frightened, but at this point, nothing got me worked up anymore. After about an hour drive, we pulled up to the main steel door, and the officer called in some 10 code, and the doors opened. I could already see the guards waiting for me inside the building. They approached the car and pulled open my door. "Step out of the vehicle and follow the yellow line," the guard commanded. I didn't say anything. I was escorted to a holding cell where they emptied my pockets and removed my handcuffs. The guard was pretty much an ass. I didn't care much for him. "Take off your clothes and put them in the box," the guard ordered. I removed my clothes and stood there waiting naked. "Turn, bend over, and spread." "What?" "Turn, bend over, and spread." "I bet you'd like that, wouldn't you, officer?" The only way I could tell that the guard was not thrilled with my response was that he took his baton and butt-ended me in the ribs with it. There's not a finer picture than that of a naked guy gasping for air on the hard cement floor. The guard reholstered a stick and repeated, "Turn, bend over, and spread." I did the best I could, and then he threw some clothes at me: an orange jumpsuit, boxers, and sandals, locking the cell behind him. I sat and thought a bit about life and how mine was passing before me. I knew Chev was my only chance. It took at least 4 hours for them to find a spot or a cell for me. I didn't even get to my new digs until about 4 a.m. I figured everyone would be sleeping, but of course I was wrong. I followed alongside the guard, shuffling my feet because they put shackles and cuffs on me with a chain joined in the middle. All the inmates were yelling, "Fish! New fish!" I don't have to remind anyone that I have blonde hair and was more popular than the majority of the females I could think of. The things they said they would like to do to me were a little tough to take and made the spit, God knows what, walk of terror all the longer. Finally, I made it to my cell and the guard yelled, "Crack 17!" The big iron door opened, and I could see that there was a big, fat-gutted, tattooed guy in the top bunk already. He didn't say a word with his voice, but his stare had a whole conversation with me. The guard yelled, "Close 17!" and the door closed behind me. "Hands through the door, fish, so I can remove the cuffs. You'll get it, new fish." He barked out and then he let out a laugh. I looked around and slowly made my way to the bottom bunk. "Hey, did you ask me, fish, if you could sit on my bunk?" I backed up a bit to see my new roommate. He was already jumping off the bunk to set me straight. "No," I replied. "Do I need to?" "You're damn right you need to. You don't do anything in here without my permission." "Can I sit on the bottom bunk?" "Not tonight. You can sleep on the floor, fish." I had to assume that a fish was a new guy, and I was just going to have to be the new guy for a while. I wasn't completely unfamiliar with this kind of crap because it happened at school all the time. I don't think I slept the entire night, nor did I close my eyes for fear of what might happen to me. It must have been morning because someone started barking orders and all the doors on the floor were opened. The guard was yelling to get on the yellow line for head count and chow. They marched us right over and force-fed us some of the grossest who knows what I've ever seen. I quickly learned that every table was owned by someone, and that I was only going to be able to sit at the fish table. I sat by myself and only ate the bread because it was all I could stomach. After breakfast, if that's what you call it, we had an hour in the break game room. I noticed that they had phones on the wall and a sign that said, "Call limit, 10 minutes." I looked around and no one was really paying attention to me, so I walked over and picked up the phone. I was a little stunned that it had a dial tone, so I dialed Chev's number and it began to ring. I was surprised because Chev answered the phone. "Chev, it's Ellis." "Where are you, Ellis?" "I'm in prison right now." No sooner had I gotten that out and I felt someone grab the phone from my hand, slam it down, hanging the phone up. I turned and looked and thought, what the hell? But I wasn't looking for trouble, so I shook my head and walked away. I found a chair and went and sat by myself. I could see a bit of a stirring going on among some pretty scary-looking white inmates. Soon the biggest, nastiest-looking one sauntered over and in his best inmate voice said, "Boy, you better do something about that, or he's gonna own your ass, if you know what I mean." I didn't know exactly what he meant, so I said, "What should I do?" "Well, if I were you, I'd walk over there by the ping pong table and slam his head on it until he understands that he can't do that again." I could hear some other inmates behind me muttering with excitement that it was showtime. It was strange. I got up and walked over and did exactly that. I grabbed the back of his head and began slamming his skull on the end of the ping pong table. Blood was everywhere. And after he was half dead, I told him that if he ever did something like that again, I'd kill him. He laid there and I just walked away and not looking back. I sat in a chair and just looked around. The big guy just gave me a nod of approval and turned around. I wasn't sure, but I thought maybe I made a friend, or at least not an enemy. I thought later about what I had done, but the reality of this place was unavoidable. And when someone that dominant gives advice, you follow it. The next day I returned to the game room with my new me or them attitude, just for a little projection as a tough guy. I could see my big friend across the room, and when he looked, I gave him a nod. He just turned and talked to the rest of the hard asses in the group. Soon he walked over to me. "What's your name, boy?" "Ellis," I responded. "My name is Cecil, but you can call me Stallone." "Stallone? Why do they call you Stallone?" "Obviously, because I look just like Sylvester Stallone." Hell, I knew he didn't look a thing like Rocky, but he looked like he could crush me like Rocky, so I told him, "Sounds good. You know, Ellis, you need protection in a place like this, and I think we're the organization to do it." "Protection? Why would I need protection? You saw that I could handle myself, didn't you, Stallone?" "Well, you did well, but you won't be able to handle some of the things that are going to come your way. That is why it's always better to be a part of a pack in here." I could tell this wasn't just a handout, and I'd have to do something to earn my way in. "What do I have to do, Stallone?" "You're a smart boy, Ellis. We'll let you know when it's time. Are you in, Ellis? Can I let you know tomorrow?" Stallone just nodded his head yes, and he said, "That'll give me time to find a new name, not that girly name, Ellis." Then as fast as he came over, he was gone back to the boys. We were all called back to our cells, and again I was faced with my fat, crabby cellmate. I was feeling a bit braver, so I sat on the lower bunk and waited for him to sound off. At first, he didn't, and then here it came. "You know what? I think I'm in the mood," he whispered. Then he looked me up and down. Kind of made me feel a bit uncomfortable. I didn't say anything, I just sat there because I wasn't sure exactly what he meant. "I think I'm in the mood for some fish." I might not be the brightest bulb on the tree, but I got that statement real quick. I blurted back, "You'll have to go through Stallone to get to me." "Why? You're his already?" "No, I belong." He instantly started acting nervous. I was just kidding. I didn't mean anything by it. You're not going to say anything to Stallone, are you?" Wow, this was newfound power. "I won't tell Stallone, but back the hell off. You got it?" He responded right back, I got it, I got it." There was an awkward silence, and finally Fat Gut said, "Hey, I really didn't mean anything by all that. It's just that you have to protect yourself in here, and if you don't set the tone, it could be your life." "I get what you're saying," I empathetically responded. "What's your name?" "Everyone calls me Slade." "What about you? What's your name?" I remembered that Stallone said Ellis was not going to cut it, so I quickly thought about a new name. "My friends call me Showtime." "Why Showtime?" "Well, because if you mess with me, you can be guaranteed that it'll be showtime." Well, good to meet you, Showtime. In short order, I could see that this persona that I had to adapt could certainly save my life or divert some future attacks. I sat on the bunk thinking I was in a bad spot because I told Slade that I belonged, whatever that meant. But it sure carried a lot of weight. I knew, too, that I had to find Stallone and let him know I was in before anyone found out that I wasn't. In prison, time to think is in abundance, so I sat and thought about what it is that I might have to do to appease my new affiliation. When yard time came, I beat hell right out there to find Stallone to let him know my intentions. I walked over in his direction to let him know the good news. However, I was aggressively met by two of the biggest goons I had ever seen. I was on the ground and a forearm was crushing my windpipe before I could say, "Yo, Adrian!" Stallone turned around and looked at me on the ground, whimpering for air. "Let him up, he's cool." As the gorillas climbed off, I rubbed my throat trying to provide some sort of relief. "What's the verdict, Ellis?" I answered in a gravelly toned voice. "You mean Showtime?" Stallone smirked and said, "I like it. All right, Showtime it is." Stallone spun around with his arms straight out as if to include everyone in our area. "Everyone, this is Showtime. He's one of us now." I felt instant relief. I didn't even really know why. I still had to do something for my new family, and I didn't know what that was going to be. "Showtime, you are no longer a fish. You are of the Brotherhood. However, this cannot be complete until you finish a small task at my request. But we'll get to that later. Showtime, for now, you're a prospect. And if a member asks you to do something, you do it." Stallone explained the yard and how certain areas belong to different groups, and that you do not stray or consort with others without permission. "Showtime, now just what the hell did you do to get yourself in a fine establishment like this?" I guess I was still naive, but I always said what was on my mind. "I'm innocent," I proclaimed. Stallone and the rest of them started laughing. "Showtime, we're all innocent." "No, I am really," I debated back. "What happened then, Showtime?" All the other prisoners were still snickering and laughing, and I responded that I was set up by Remedy. Everyone's head jerked toward me, and all of the caterwaulings stopped. They had almost a fearful look on their face. "Did I say something wrong?" I proposed to Stallone. "Don't say that out loud again, Ellis." Okay, that made me feel a bit separated when he called me by my first name. Stallone grabbed me by the left arm and pulled me over to a remote corner of the yard. "Showtime. The word alone can get you killed in here." "Get me killed? Shit. I took on the head of Remedy, and now I'm in here. Plus I have something on them that could do them all in." Stallone cautiously looked around and lowered his voice. "Like what?" All of a sudden, I felt like I had the upper hand, so I pulled back a bit. "Let's just say that I know everything there is to know about Remedy, and then some. I know the players, I know how they do it, and I have even seen where they keep the bodies." Stallone looked at me as if I had a whole new status among the family. "Well, hell, then you really are Showtime, isn't you?" I adjusted my shoulders and nodded my head in agreement. "Damn, Showtime. If you really know all of that, it could elevate you to an elite status in this hellhole of devils." Before I could elaborate any more, the bell rang, just like I remembered at the ending of school lunchtime. Only this bell meant all prisoners back to their cells. I followed the yellow line back to my cell and waited for Slade to return before they ordered lockdown. I could see Slade walking with a new strut in his step as he was walking toward me in the cell. "Damn, Holmes, I'm rooming with the man." I looked at him with a goofy stare. "What do you mean, Slade?" "Nothing. I'm just rooming with the man. Whatever you need, Showtime." I was a bit confused still. I started to ask Slade again, and he cut me off. "Let me just say, word travels fast, and you're now elite." I raised my eyebrows because this was starting to sound like a good thing. even though I didn't really understand my new throne. In the next couple weeks, I spent a lot of time getting to know Slade and also used my new celebrity status to gain valuable perks. Slade was not such a bad guy, other than the fact that he killed his girlfriend for not calling him back when she should have. I don't think you could really ever trust anyone in this joint, but certain alliances had to be made if you wanted to survive. Weeks went by, and this insanity became more tolerable and more normal every day. All you really do was to sit and think and to lift weights. So I did. I had tried to contact Chev on numerous occasions, but I could never get him to answer the phone. And it just didn't feel right to leave a message asking him to call me back at the prison. I had all but forgotten about my chore to become a full-blood member until Stallone approached me in the yard. "Showtime," he whispered. "It's time." "It's time for what?" "It's time for you to contribute to the Brotherhood." Just like the naive kid I was, I responded with, "What do I have to do?" Stallone moved closer to me and put his hand in mine, passing a homemade knife, better known as a shank. He whispered, "Put this in your pocket." I nervously asked again, "What for?" "When I give you the word, you stick him in the back as many times as you can. When I give the word, do you understand?" I didn't, but I said yes anyways. I could see that all of my brothers were positioning themselves as lookouts around the yard. I was nervous because I had never tried to kill anyone before, but I figured there must be a reason that this has to be done. Stallone ever so slightly nodded his head toward one of the inmates as if to identify my target. His back was to me, so I hadn't personalized my actions yet. I walked closer to the target and readied the shank in my hand. I could hardly hold the knife because I was sweating so much, and I was having trouble breathing because of my nerves. I didn't even see Stallone until he was right next to me, but he leaned over in my ear and whispered, "Devil's in the yard." I'm not even sure how I knew, but I knew that was my signal. Without hesitation, I plunged the razor-sharp implement deep into my rite of passage's back. I pulled it out and lunged for another. It happened so quickly that I had already stuck him 4 or 5 times before I could even get a look at the man. As he turned his face to look, I could clearly see that it was Slade lying on the ground. What have I done? I froze, and Slade looked at me as if I were the Reaper himself standing over him. I knew in an instant that I was one of them, no longer an innocent. Within a matter of seconds, Slade was dead, and the yard began to scatter. Stallone walked over and grabbed the shank, instructing me to lose myself in the melee. I just walked in a trance as if I had been changed forever. Guards were everywhere, and the instruction to lie on the ground came loudly over the PA system through the tear gas. I laid face down and began to wipe my hands off in the grass. The intermittent dirt stuck to my blood-stained hands, so I rolled my hand in the grass until it mostly wiped off. The guards were hovered over Slade, looking for any clues as to who might have carried out such a despicable act. It wasn't long and we were all in lockdown in our cells, so they could attempt to sort this out. It wasn't until 2 days later that I was brought into the head guard's office for questioning. I spent the previous 2 days sitting on my bunk in a daze and contemplating what I had done. It was an entirely different feeling than Clarice. Clarice made me feel like a stupid kid that was worried about getting in trouble, because I knew that I had nothing to do with it. Slade, on the other hand, changed something in me. Instantaneously, I went from being a shy, awkward high school kid to a hardened, emotionless killer. Killing Slade bothered me a great deal because I had taken another man's life, but the mere fact that I acted so spontaneously to the command was downright sickening to me. I knew now that when I watched all those killers on the TV news over the years, that I was maybe just a few decisions or situations different than them, and now I was one of them. I still felt like a good person inside, but I knew that I would never be the same again. Finally, I had my turn in the guard's office. No one had ever told me how to handle this sort of thing, but Somehow I knew that it was an unwritten rule that you say nothing to no one about nobody. The guard drilled me with stock questions about what I knew, and I played it like a seasoned convict. That is, until he told me that Slade had only 3 weeks left in his sentence, and it would be the first time he would see his twin boys. I couldn't help it. I said it out loud. "That's awful." "You're damn right it is," the guard blasted back at me. "But you'll never tell, will you?" I looked down and said, "I don't know anything." "Get out of here then, you make me sick." They took me back to my cell, and I just laid there for the rest of the day thinking about little Sarah and what I had just taken away from this man and his children. Standard procedure called for a few days lockdown. A few days later, I returned to the yard for the first time. Once I made it out of the building door, I headed right for the Brotherhood's area to talk with Stallone. As I walked, I started to notice a lot of inmates getting out of my way. I eventually made my way to Stallone, and he put his arms out wide and said, "Can you feel it?" I put my hands out. "Can I feel what?" "You have rocketed to superstardom. You are Super Showtime." "Listen, Stallone, I feel like shit about this. I'm not a killer." "Too late, baby. You're the man, and you are a killer. You own this place now. What you say is what it is. Showtime killed your own cellmate for no reason, and you sent a message by doing it in front of everyone. Take advantage of this for you and for the Brotherhood." In a sick way, Stallone put me in a much better place than I would have been in here. I thought for a second and started to enjoy the fact that I could call the shots and get anything I wanted. "Stallone, what does being the top dog mean?" "It means that I'm your right-hand man, Showtime. It means that you get to pick your food, cellmate, and you get to have visitors." "Visitors?" "Yes, because you're the top dog. The guards will work with you so you can keep all the rest of the animals under control. The animals will listen to their master, so to speak." "I have to go, Stallone." I walked back to my cell and started thinking that this would be a perfect chance for me to work on my defense, to get me out of this hellhole. I learned quickly that just because you're locked up doesn't mean that you can't control or manipulate things on the outside. I realized that the information that I had about Remedy was invaluable, and I knew that because of how scared people were, even in here. I made sure that I made a call to Chev before lockdown, and I left a message for him to come and see me ASAP.